I love musicals, I love Wicked, and I also love pop culture. So naturally, I was also invested in the whole lore going around that movie. When you watch anything containing Ariana and Cynthia together and you open up the comments, skipping the ones talking about how strange they're acting, you'll surely always find people talking about how they're in love with each other. They're cheating on their spouses, they're having an affair, and oh my god, they're so obsessed with each other. And I know a lot of the times they are doing just a little bit too much, but every time I see these comments, I'm just asking myself, why can't two women just be friends with each other? Why can't two people be close mentally and physically and have no romantic interest in each other? Is that really so difficult to think about? Just having a deep bond? And it's not just with Ariana and Cynthia. It feels like every time two celebrities, or even just two people in general, come together, someone will be talking about how they're in love with each other and oh my god, they would be perfect for each other, even though there's no romantic interest at all. And I understand it because we grow up with it. Disney movies, the rom coms, the cheesy teenage movies. The prince gets the princess, the jock falls for the cheerleader. The two best friends realize they are meant for each other after years.
And all my life, I never thought I would be so lucky as to fall in love with my best. My best. There's a reason why girls don't do this.
Okay. I'll do it.
So beautiful, so endearing. We are raised inside of these stories, and it feels like we can't escape them. Yes, Sex and the City displays female friendships, but always circling around the romantic interest, and even Friends, ironically, seems to lay their focus on who's dating who. The message is always one day someone will choose you. Your soulmate will enter your life. Everything will be clear, and from this moment on, everything will finally make sense. This sort of fairy tale doesn't end with strong friendships, it ends with marriage. Romantic love is framed as the ultimate form of intimacy, the final level of adulthood. Without it, there's definitely something missing from your life. What do you mean? You're not in a relationship? Aren't you looking for someone? Aren't you sad alone? What do you do on your Friday nights? It must be lonely. Friendship is expected, but romance is celebrated. In this whole process, friends tend to become the side story. Important, but not really essential. Meaningful, but not primary. Deep, but never deeper than romance. Have we ever been taught to value them as much as falling in love? I know, we've heard it all a million times before. Despite being online constantly, with the ability to connect with millions of people at any given time, we are lonelier than ever. The World Health Organization states that loneliness affects people of all ages, but especially younger ones and people living in low and middle income countries. Social connection protects health, reducing the risk of serious health problems. Loneliness increases the risk of premature death by 26%, which is compatible to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. But why are we so lonely? We have access to everyone. In my opinion, a lot of the times the constant communication doesn't make it more meaningful, but rather takes away some of the meaning. Just because we can text all day or talk on the phone constantly, it doesn't mean that those interactions feed our need for connection. You see what everyone is doing on your timeline constantly, so it doesn't feel necessary to reach out anymore. You've seen what they were doing anyway all day long. There's engagement, but rarely real emotional intimacy. Meeting up with people in person is a totally different experience, but life as an adult is stressful, and a lot of the times it's hard to find time to see each other. So you're stuck with seeing the same people at work or school or wherever you're spending your days. And while it's company, it doesn't mean it's good. Pre-internet, when people wanted to socialize, shocking, they actually went outside. I know, crazy statement. Going to bars, clubs, or just hanging out at someone's house. But going outside nowadays just honestly feels so stressful. All the modern day conveniences actually make so many things more difficult. The messages, the dating apps, the streaming, the shopping, so many options. There's so much input, so much mental load, but so little realness. These modern times opt for efficiency, mobility, and productivity, not belonging. And in a world where belonging is already fragile, we've placed almost all of our emotional needs into one relationship. We've been taught that if you find that one right person, we won't feel empty or lonely anymore. That they will be everything to us: our best friend, our confidant, our emotional support system, our co parent, our everything. But what really happens when you design your entire social life around one single person? Wouldn't this honestly just cause more problems, leading to unhappier relationships and increasing the rising loneliness in our society even more? If you're single, you feel behind. If you're dating, your friends and other relationships quietly move down. If you break up, your entire emotional infrastructure collapses. Raise your hand if you've had that happen before. Raise your hand if your friend stopped reaching out to you after getting into a relationship. Your partner should carry the weight of everything: friend, therapist, sexual partner, financial collaborator, emotional regulator. How is one person honestly supposed to carry all of that weight? When you shift these roles onto other people, being fair about it, you could gain so many more rewarding connections. Having a bigger support system is a privilege, I know, but if we are lucky to have it, your system doesn't just have one single point of failure. If your relationship ended, it would be heartbreaking, of course, but you knew that you could fall back on all the other relationships you have nurtured over time. Recentering platonic relationship does not diminish romance, it relieves it. To center friendship is to question the idea that romance represents the final stage of development. Coupling is seen both as inevitable and superior, framing other bonds as temporary. Recognizing other bonds as a capable form of lifelong devotion unsettles this hierarchy and exposes marriage as just one relational motor of many, not the definite marker of adulthood. The more we treat romantic partners as the ultimate form of connection, the less we invest into broader networks that actually protect us from loneliness. Could you name a couple of movies, TV shows, or books that don't focus on romantic relationships? Because I thought about it and I honestly can't. Besides Studio Ghibli movies, and I love those very much, but after that, nothing comes to mind if I'm going to be honest. And I know that at fault for this, because if I look it up right now, there's surely a ton of media out there. But it seems like with everything that's popular, or at least with everything that I consume, there's always couples, there's always romance, there's always the talk about it. And don't get me wrong, I am not a love hater. Not at all. That's not what I'm trying to say. I think that love is very important and that love is amazing. But why is the focus always on the romantic aspect? Why is it so rare that other forms of bonds get attention? Even stories about survival, like Titanic, become love-centered. When I think of Spider-Man, I don't think of, I don't know, all of his superhero duties, but the love story arc. How cute Zendaya and Tom Holland are together. Even dystopians like The Hunger Games hinge on a love triangle. It's not just a subplot, but the emotional engine. And all of these stories are already being told to us when we are so young. It honestly all already starts at the playground. I've seen it so many times. When a girl and a boy spend much time together, the parents sit there giggling about how they like each other. Oh, it's so cute. They are already in love with each other. We're basically training children to see cross-gender closeness as inherently romantic. In school, there's always gossip about who's with who and who's done what. When someone gets into a relationship, it's almost used as a status symbol. Later in life, being in a long-term commitment leaves the impression that your life is stable and you are very mature. When we fall in love, the brain releases many hormones. The reward system is being activated. This increase in dopamine obviously feels very good, and this cocktail of intense emotions and hormones being released. Biology makes this whole experience a very thrilling experience. Other parts of your brain get deactivated. Your frontal cortex has smaller activity, which reduces emotions and judgment. So you don't realize that the dude you like is actually not that funny, not that nice, and not that charming. And you don't listen to all the people around you trying to warn you. But as we know, all of these feelings don't last. The high of feeling in love fades, and this is where a lot of people lose interest. Romantic relationships need constant work, and sometimes that work doesn't feel rewarding in the moment. But if you want something that will last, it's all worth it most of the time. When you build a life together, the spark gets lost underneath house chores, work, and stress. It's super easy to discredit the relationship, giving up without realizing everything that you had. Because then you can just hop onto Tinder and scroll through hundreds of profiles. There's an endless ocean of attractive people willing to take you to Olive Garden next Friday. So why even be sad about your relationship ending? At the same time, many people stay in bad relationships for a lot of different reasons, committing to toxic people who don't deserve it.
He is bad for you. Jesus, every time you get near him, you turn into this pathetic, needy, insecure victim. And the thing that pisses me off the most is that you're more than willing to go right back for more.
I am not going back for more, and I can't believe you would say that to me.
If you start up with Big again...
I am not starting up with Big again.
Well, if you do, I don't want to know anything about it. I mean it, Carrie. No calls, no crying.
Oh, what are you going to do, Miranda? You going to cut me out of your life like you did to Steve?
What?
The first sign of any little weakness or flaw, and you just write people off. My God, Miranda, you are so judgmental. Oh, what, you can say that I'm pathetic and needy and I can't say anything to you?
This can happen out of fear, out of habit, or just not wanting to be alone. I think that if we stopped circling all of our happiness around romantic relationships, we'd get a much healthier approach to connections. We think that only romance can fill our emotional void because this is what we have been taught. Of course, it's all very beautiful, but with our modern life, our consumption of engagement and wedding videos and all the rom-coms, it appears to be more of an obsession. Romantic love did not become central by accident. It rose at the intersection of two powerful forces. Let's talk about capitalism and individualism, and let's start with individualism, a concept that's deeply embedded in the Western world, but on the rise in a lot of other places around the world too. In pre-industrial societies, identity was rooted in extended family, the village, the religious community, and kinship networks. A major turning point was the Protestant Reformation, especially the work of Martin Luther. His theology emphasized personal faith, direct relationships with God, and an individual interpretation of Scripture. This was a big shift since religious authority was weakened through these thoughts. The Enlightenment philosophy also deepened this orientation. Before their ideas, many societies believed that kings ruled because God chose them. People were born into fixed hierarchies, and authority came from tradition or divine right. The industrial capitalism intensified this transformation. People moved from villages to cities, now working individually rather than collectively within the family-based systems. Now, the market did not recognize those old systems. It recognized workers and consumers. The self became an economic unit, and extended kinship networks weakened. Over time, especially in places like the United States, individualism evolved into a cultural idea. Identity itself became a project to cultivate, refine, and optimize. People were not only expected to make a living on their own, but also finding meaning individually, to discover their own authentic self, pursue fulfillment, and take responsibility for their own happiness. This obviously reshaped the idea of intimacy. Networks thinned out, and fewer collective spaces exist to hold the need for attachment and belonging. We still obviously have a need for all of those feelings, but it feels more and more difficult to fulfill them. In a society organized around independent individuals, romantic partnership emerged as the primary source of deep dependency. The couple became the smallest stable unit in an otherwise self-directed world. So this also ties into why friendships suffer underneath our hyper-individualistic views. You've probably seen the endless TikToks of people telling you how they're protected their peace a little too hard, or I don't need anyone, or something along those lines. Doing a favor for someone without wanting anything in return seems insufferable for most. I've seen people ending friendships over the stupidest things, but the same people tend to stay in toxic, insufferable relationships through years and years. In order to build meaningful connections, we need to adapt and care for others. Sometimes you have to jump over the hurdle of your own ego and maybe do things that won't necessarily hurt you, but maybe a tad uncomfortable. Would you help your friends move on the weekend, your only day off, after you've had the shittiest week at your job? Will you go over to their house in the middle of the night when they call you crying, despite needing your own sleep? Capitalist life demands time and energy for work, productivity, and self-optimization, leaving little consistent attention for friends. Mobility can further disrupt connections as people move for jobs or relationships, while friendships often get left behind. We don't build rituals around them. Yes, I know some people celebrate Valentine's Day or make boo baskets for their co-workers, but it's not as deeply ingrained in our society as throwing parties for the engagement, the anniversary, or the wedding. Friendships demand emotional openness without the safety net of a legal or social guarantee. In a culture that prizes self-sufficiency, admitting dependence or asking for help might feel risky. Romantic relationships are socially sanctioned for this. Friendships often aren't. So when we go way back, obviously relationships and marriage and all of those concepts as we know them today didn't exist yet. In the Stone Age, humans lived in small, independent groups. This was extremely important for survival because everything was shared, from care work to food to labor. Marriage as a form of formal structure began to take shape when humans began to settle. In many ancient societies, from ancient Egypt to ancient Greece, marriage was less about two individuals choosing each other and more about two families negotiating terms. This was supposed to ensure security. When agriculture emerged, land started becoming valuable and property became inheritable. So lineage started to matter. So the bond of two people was also a contract. Who owns what and who inherits what. By the medieval times, marriage became a different layer of authority, since the church also became a part of it. Now it wasn't just a social contract, but also a sacred spiritual bond, and God was part of that bond. This dramatically reduced the ease of divorce. A slight shift was seen in the early modern period because now affection kind of began to matter. Spouses shouldn't just cooperate, but also like each other. But of course, economics still mattered. As we know, women's financial survival often depending on the marriage. When the industrialization came around, work moved out of the home into factories and offices. People migrated to the city, and the idea of marriage started to shrink in the sense that now it was mainly two people and a much smaller amount of kids, where beforehand a lot of children were needed to work the land. But with this shrinking, something else expanded. Where there used to be a web of kinship, now there's your partner. And a lot of the times, that's it. That partner is supposed to fill many roles. Your emotional anchor, your support system, your roommate, your financial partner, your best friend. Where there used to be roles that distributed across a whole village, those roles are now concentrated into a single person. Before, care was communal, labor was shared, emotional support was diversified. Now, emotional regulation, financial survival, domestic labor, companionship, co-parenting, all that falls right into the lap of the person you love. And if we're going to be honest, a lot of the times when just one aspect seems to be failing, the whole relationship gets seen as toxic or bad or unsatisfying, and we might throw it out completely. We didn't just shrink the household, we privatized survival. There's still a transactional nature that comes with relationships, partners being evaluated on their value, such as income or status. It's no secret that a big point of conflict between partners is finances. Financial compatibility becomes a major relationship factor. Our modern capitalist societies don't just organize labor and markets, but sadly also our relationships. Society builds its emotional infrastructure around couples and not communities. Romantic kinship, especially marriage, is not simply a personal milestone. It is an economically recognized unit. Friendship, no matter how profound, is not. So in our modern times, we all put so much emphasis on investment, investing our energy and investing our time. Most of this is already used at our jobs and then most likely into our relationships. Friendships appear to be an aspect that gets less attention, especially the older we get. I see this around myself so much. I've heard the words, oh, we should hang out more, but it's so difficult making time more times than I can count.
But sometimes words go unsaid, disagreements go unresolved. You still talk on the phone, keep up on social media, but a year goes by where you don't see each other, and that year turns to 5. And before you know it, you're so busy trying to get what you want that one day you look up and find out that the thing you love the most, your crew, the people who make you feel at home no matter where you are, they're gone.
The capitalistic way of life makes us believe that oneself is the most important thing. Others are competitors, and money is the main goal. And marriage honestly moves you towards that goal. Being benefited when it comes to the financial systems, healthcare structures, and tax policy. For example, in the United States, married couples may receive tax benefits through joint filing, access to spousal health insurance, social security, spousal benefits, and inheritance right without heavy taxation. Friendships support people profoundly, providing emotional depth. But there's no tax category to friendships, no bereavement leave guarantee, no immigration sponsorship rights, no default inheritance protections. The absence of institutional recognition reveals a hierarchy of intimacy. Romantic partnerships is presumed primary, friendship is presumed supplementary. The state doesn't just recognize love, it ranks it. Single adults frequently pay more for housing, lack access to partner benefits, and are sometimes viewed as incomplete or transitional. The structure subtly nudges individuals towards coupling, not necessarily for love, but for stability. There's always a need for demographic continuity. While reproduction is biologically individual, its economic consequences are collective. Children become future workers, taxpayers, and consumers. So, from the state's perspective, a married couple raising children is an efficient reproduction system. Friends can co-parent, but there's no legal script supporting it. The law assumes reproduction happens within romantic couples. And also, one of the least visible functions of marriage is the distribution of unpaid labor. And marriage organizes that labor efficiently. So I'm just asking myself, how would our ideas of relationships change if capitalism didn't reward which bonds are structurally supported or legally rewarded? Would we be happier? Would we be sure to make more time for people outside of our romantic relationships? Would maybe happier children be born and raised? Friendships can carry you through crisis, yet it receives no tax status, no default inheritance rights, no guaranteed hospital access. While romantic relationships are seen as mature, stable, responsible, and forward-moving, friendships can be framed as secondary, youthful, transitional, and optional. I'm not saying that romantic relationships or marriage is simply a capitalistic tool, but if society builds infrastructure around couples and not friendships, then the organization of love is not purely natural, but also political. If you'd ask me who raised me, I'd first name my mom and my grandma. My grandpa was also a huge part of it, but the women in my life shaped me, taught me many valuable life lessons, and always protected me. They are my emotional anchors. I started going to therapy when I was really young, and I changed therapists a couple of times. I remember this one therapist really vividly, for one thing especially. One day I was supposed to talk about my family dynamics and how I grew up. And I talked about my mom, my grandparents, and my sibling. And of course, the big question emerged. So, Where's dad? And I explained how he was never in the picture. I never had a relationship with him. My therapist asked me how it made me feel, and I thought about it and I just shrugged my shoulders. It made me feel nothing. And I could tell that she was not happy with this answer. She was sure that I missed a father figure. All throughout our sessions, she was pretty unhappy with me, just in general, because I was young and I buried a lot of my trauma. I didn't really let her in, so we couldn't really successfully work on a lot of things. Many, many years later, now I can see all of it. I can see how I pushed down things, tried to bury them, but there's one thing that I still stand on. I never missed the father figure in my life. There was never a day in my life where I looked at other little girls and I felt jealous or sad over the fact that their dad picked them up from school, played with them, or sat with them at the dinner table. I never knew what it was like, so how could I miss it? Why do we push these ideas on kids that they need a mother and a father and then they grow up happily with the right balance of feminine and masculine energy? I think it's bullshit, to be honest. I was raised mainly by women, and yes, I am messed up. I am messed up a little bit, but that's not due to who raised me. But I mean, obviously, some things go into it, but that's not, it's not due to me being raised by mainly two women. I work in the social field with kids, and one thing I can tell you, most of them have no father figure in their life. If they do, most of the time, it's a very difficult relationship. So many unhappy parents with struggling relationships or marriages, which put a huge strain on the kids, leaving them with trauma that will last a lifetime. So, my question is, what would intimacy look like if we organized it differently? What would it mean to create structure that recognized, protected, and rewarded friendships, chosen family, and other non-romantic bonds? Exploring alternative models of intimacy reveals both the limitation of our current system and the possibility for richer, more resilient social connections. One thing I stand on strongly is that we'd probably raise way happier children in healthier households and structures. Or if childcare was more communal, more publicly supported, and less privatized, then adults might not rely exclusively on romantic partners for stability. Imagine if friendships would have the same possibility of recognition when it comes to legal and social legitimacy. Imagine a society in which long-term friendships could access some of the same benefits that marriage currently provides. Hospital visitation rights, inheritance protections, shared housing benefits, or even tax considerations. Doing so would acknowledge that emotional labor and care do not solely reside within romantic partnerships. It would formalize the value of relational networks that already sustain individuals across decades, offering institutional reinforcement for bonds that currently exist largely in private. Beyond legal recognition, communities could cultivate collective households or chosen family networks. Anthropologists note that in many societies, multiple adults share domestic, emotional, and economic responsibilities without relying on romantic pairing. Applying this model to modern life could decentralize care and reduce the overburdening of romantic partners. Emotional dependence, caregiving, and companionship could be spread across multiple people, creating redundancy and resilience in social life. Exactly what friendship naturally provides, but that current system ignores. Ultimately, exploring alternative models of intimacy exposes how deeply our current relational hierarchies are socially constructed. Romantic love is not inherently more important than friendship. It is simply the relationship form most legible and rewarded under capitalism and individualism. By imagining different structures, like communal households or networks of chosen family, we can envision a world in which intimacy is plural, distributed, and resilient. Friends and romance don't need to compete. They can coexist as complementary networks of support, care, and meaning. This can offer practical pathways to build lives rich in connection, care, and belonging. Just this morning, I've watched a TikTok where someone was sharing how they just got divorced and are embarrassed about the fact that they had to move back to their parents' home. You've also probably seen endless content like this. The move back, not being able to afford something on your own. But, shouldn't that be celebrated? No matter the hardship, you have somewhere to return to. And I know how simple it is for me to just say it. I understand the difficulty and the emotion when feeling like you are taking a step back, whatever that means. But isn't that also just the mindset of hustle culture that drives us a little bit insane? You'd probably get smiles and giggles when you share that you are 40 and live with your roommates. Different story when you share your apartment with your partner. And why? What's the difference? Just because you get to make out with one and not the other? Why has one more meaning than the other? Because it seems like you haven't made it big, made the mature adult decision to commit someone in romantic ways. It's honestly a little bit ridiculous. But then imagine there's an elderly person who's lonely. They get a roommate to work against that loneliness. Now it's sweet and endearing again, right? Now it's important again that they have company, no matter the relation to each other. Ultimately, our obsession with romance reflects not only on desire, but design. It is the product of legal, economic, and cultural systems that reward one form of intimacy while neglecting others. If we acknowledge this, we gain the freedom to imagine and cultivate a richer relational landscape, one in which love, care, and support are plural, diverse, and accessible to all, not just those bound in partnership.